Hey guys. It's Wednesday, April 1st. April Fools! Wookie woo. I hate being punked. I hate pranks. Just gonna put that out there. Don't even think about it. I just know no, don't even think about it. So today we are going, yep, Stella needs to get a little nose in there. She you're needy today. So we're going to take on chapters 18 and 19. We're going to keep going with our trial booklet. So grab your trial booklet, grab your book, grab your sourcing pages. Do it now. Don't dawdle. And we will start and get those chapters. Now, I'm going just to do 18 and you got to have your face in there, don't you? We're just going to do 18 and 19 this week. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I know a lot of you have a lot of other homework. And I want some of you are totally caught up. Some of you are struggling to get caught up. It's really easy to procrastinate when you're crouched in your burrow. So I'm just telling you, been there, done that, doing that. So I'd like us to do the two chapters this week, 18 and 19, and that way we can work through the trial book. I don't want you to send me pics of your trial book till we're all done. Okay. I know you're working on it, or I am saying a prayer, giving all my good wishes that you're doing what you need to be doing. Because I trust my boo bears. I know. Here we are. We are in quarantine. It's getting a little tougher. Things are getting a little more harsh in the world. I still think it's super ironic that we're reading this and this is happening, because I'll say it again. We were sitting in class and I went, you know what? We've never experienced this in our lives. Our ancestors have, but we haven't, and we're experiencing it. So I spoke too soon? I don't know. But I'm hoping you're all okay. Take things in little chunks. Anybody, a child to adult, will feel overwhelmed if they feel like they've got such an enormous load. Take things in little chunks. Do a chunk of this type of work, then go and do another chunk of something else, and come back to it. We have the ability in our English class that we can do that. This works just really, really well. I just don't want you to be anxious, to be feeling oppressed. You know me, that's the last thing I want you to feel. I want you to be totally embracing what's going on. I'm going to remind you, I'm in my Zoom office Monday through Friday from 9 until 11. I have novels class and theater class alternating days from 11 to 12. But from 9 to 11, you can jump in my office and holler at me. You also have the ability to text me and email me and use the Remind. So we've got lots of options. We got lots of stuff. So in saying that, you should have your trial booklet, a writing utensil of some sort, your sourcing pages, and your book. Capiche? Okay. So let's take on our next two chapters. Okay. And we're going to be hearing the testimony of Mayella. Now, Jada Walton brought up something very important, interesting, that I have not seen on any professional literary critiques, writings. It's always been noted, even though Harper doesn't, she never intended this to be super symbolic. I mean, she has tons of symbols in this story. And the Ewell, or the Ewell residence, if you imagine this mess, but someone has planted these 3 little red geraniums in little chipped enamel pots hanging off of the fence, which gives you a symbolism of some beauty in a struggling world. Jada brought up the point after I had mentioned the incest, Mayella being the oldest, and we have all these little ones that mom's been gone a while. That those red geraniums could even symbolize miscarriages she may have had, stillborn births she may have had. I'm going to be real with you. It's welcome to the world, guys. Welcome to the world. Believe it or not, we have individuals in your school, peers, who deal with a lot of dark things, and they don't show it. They hide it well. That's why I'm always asking you not to jump to conclusions, to judgments so quickly until you walk in someone's shoes. Yeah, there it is. All right, so with all that rolling around in your head, we're going to start on chapter 18. And this is going to be the testimony time for Mayella. So here we go. But someone was booming again. Mayella, Violet, Ewell. A young girl walked to the witness stand, and as she raised her hand and swore that the word she gave would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help her God, she seemed somehow fragile looking. But when she sat facing us in the witness chair, she became what she was, a thick-bodied girl accustomed to strenuous labor. Now, in Macomb County, it was easy to tell when someone bathed regularly as opposed to yearly libations. Mr. Ewell had a scalded look, as if an overnight soaking had deprived him of protective layers of dirt, and his skin appeared to be sensitive to the elements. Mayella looked as if she tried to keep clean, and I was reminded of the row of red geraniums in the Ewell yard. Mr. Gilmer asked Mayella to tell the jury, in her own words, what happened on the evening of November 21st of last year, just in her own words, please. And Mayella sat silently. Where were you at dusk on that evening? Began Mr. Gilmer patiently. On the porch. Which porch? Ain't but one, the front porch. Well, what are you doing on the porch? Nothing. Judge Taylor said, tell us what happened. You can do that, can't you? Mayella stared at him and burst into tears. She covered her mouth with her hands and sobbed. Judge Taylor let her cry for a while, and then he said, now that's enough now. Don't be afraid of anybody here as long as you tell the truth. All this is strange to you, I know, but you've nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to fear. What are you scared of? Mayella said something behind her hands. What was that? Asked the judge. Him, she sobbed, pointing at Atticus. Mr. Finch? Mm-hmm. She nodded vigorously, saying, I don't want him doing me like he done Papa, trying to make him out left-handed. Judge Taylor scratched his thick white hair, and it was plain that he'd never been confronted with a problem of this kind. How old are you? He asked. 19 and a half, Mayella said. Judge Taylor cleared his throat, and he tried unsuccessfully to speak in soothing tones. Mr. Finch has no idea of scaring you, he growled, and if he did, I'm here to stop him. That's the one thing I'm sitting up here for. Now, you're a big girl, so you just sit up straight and you tell us what happened to you. You can do that, can't you? I whispered to Jim. Has she got good sense? Jim was squinting down at the witness stand. I can't tell you, he said. She's got enough sense to get the judge to feel sorry for her, but she might be oh, I don't know. Mollified, Mayella gave Atticus a final terrified glance and said to Mr. Gilmer, "Well, sir, I was on the porch and he came along, see, and you see there was this old chifforobe in the yard Papa brought in chop up for kindling." Now we heard that term chifforobe when we were watching Oh Brother Where Art Thou. Um, the wedding ring was in the chifforobe in the cabin. A chifforobe is like a particle board closet that you can obviously hold things, and some they'd have drawers in them, so it's like a real cheaply made particle board dresser closet sort together. So yeah, and it was probably something that they got from the dump, so it's already scrappy on its last legs. Okay. And there was this old chifforobe in the yard Papa brought in to chop up for kindling. Papa told me to do it while he was off in the woods, but I, I wasn't feeling strong enough then, so he came by. Who was he? Mayella pointed to Tom Robinson. "I'll have to ask you to be more specific, please," said Mr. Gilmer. "The reporter can't put down gestures very well." "That yonder," she said. "Robinson." "Well, then what happened?" I said, "Come here, nigger, and bust up this chifforobe for me. I got a nickel for you." If she has a nickel and the worth of a nickel, how has she gotten these nickels? He could have done it easy enough, he could. So he come into the yard and I went in the house to get him the nickel. And I turned around and before I knew it, he was on me. And he just run up behind me. He did. He got me around the neck, cussing and saying dirt. And I fought and I hollered, but he had me around the neck and he hit me again and again. Okay. So let's look at our trial booklet. Okay, so we know from what she just told us that she was on the porch. So in number one, we need to have she was on the porch. And he came along and she asked him to chop up the chifforobe. Okay, so there's number one. On the porch, Tom came along. She wasn't feeling strong enough, good enough, Lord knows why, and asked Tom to come and chop it up. Okay, there's fact one. Fact two, she went in the house to get a nickel. And the next thing she knew, he was on top of her. And she was fighting, and he had her around the neck and hitting her. So we need to put that in for number two. She went in to get a nickel to pay him, which that's interesting. We'll get to it. And then he was on top of her, hands around her neck, and hitting her. Hands around her neck. Okay, and remember, she had marks all the way around her neck, bruising around her neck. Okay. So there's our facts one and two. Okay. Mr. Gilmer waited for Mayella to collect herself. She twisted her handkerchief into a sweaty rope. And when she opened it to wipe her face, it was a mass of creases from her hot hands. She waited for Mr. Gilmer to ask another question, but when he didn't, she said, "He chunked me to the floor and choked me and took advantage of me." "Well, did you scream?" asked Mr. Gilmer. "Did you scream and fight back?" "Well, I reckon I did. I hollered for all I was worth, and I kicked and I hollered as loud as I could." "Well, then what happened?" "I don't remember too good, but the next thing I knew, Papa was in the room and standing over me hollering, "Who done it? Who done it?" And then I sort of fainted, and the next thing I knew, Mr. Tate was pulling me up off the floor and leading me to the water bucket. Okay. So now in our trial book, let's add a little more. Under 3 and 4. Okay. Now she says he chunked her, meaning he tossed her onto the floor, and he choked her and he raped her, took advantage of her, raped her. Okay. So that's under our number 3. And then under 4, because Gilmer then asks her if she screamed. So number 4 fact is, she says, I screamed for all I was worth. I kicked and hollered as loud as I could. Okay. There's number 4. And also in number 4, she fainted. And next thing she knew, Mr. Tate was helping her stand up and getting her some water. So that's our 3s and our 4s for facts. Okay. Write those in there, because otherwise you'll forget it. You can stop and start this. So get it in there so you don't forget those facts. Facts. Okay. All right. Apparently, Mayela's recital had given her confidence, but it was not her father's brash kind. There was something stealthy about hers, like a steady cat with a twitchy tail. So he's saying there's something not quite trustworthy about Mayela. But here's what you need to think about. You need to reflect on this. Let this soak in. If you are being abused, you can tell the court what's happening, or you're in fear that if the person who's harming you is not taken care of, is not reprimanded, is not punished, that fear of retribution, that fear of punishment. So think about Mayela sitting there all her life. Let me ask you this, all her life, has she had to lie, steal, do whatever she needs to survive her life? So she knows how to be sneaky because she has to be sneaky to survive. Okay, why is she doing that? It's a learned behavior. It's what she knows for survival. Okay, you gotta step back and walk in her shoes. We don't like her behavior per se. We don't like used by his grandparents and parents is highly likely. Okay. So you say you fought him off as hard as you could? You fought him tooth and nail? Asked Mr. Gilmer. I positively did, Mayela echoed her father. And you're positive he took full advantage of you? Now, Mayela's face contorted, and I was afraid she'd cry again. And instead, she said, he'd done what he was after. Now, Mr. Gilmer called attention to the hot day by wiping his head with his hand. That's all for the time being, he said pleasantly. But you stay there. I expect big, bad Mr. Finch has some questions to ask you. State will not prejudice the witness against counsel for the defense, murmured the Judge Taylor primly. At least not at this time. Now, Atticus got up grinning. But instead of walking to the witness stand, he opened his coat and he hooked his thumbs in his vest. And then he didn't seem especially interested in what he saw. Then he turned and he strolled back to the witness stand. And from long years of experience, I could tell he was trying to come to a decision about something. Miss Mayella, he said, smiling, I won't try to scare you for a while, not yet. Let's get acquainted. How old are you? Said I was 19. I said it to the judge yonder. Mayella jerked her head resentfully at the bench. So you did. So you did, ma'am. You'll have to bear with me, Miss Mayella. I'm getting along, and I can't remember as well as I used to. I might ask you things you've already said before, but You'll give me an answer, won't you? Good. Now, I could see nothing in Maella's expression to justify Atticus's assumption that he'd secured her wholehearted cooperation. She was looking at him furiously. "I won't say a word you say as long as you keep on mocking me," she said. "Ma'am," said Atticus, startled. "Long as you keep on making fun of me." Judge Taylor said, Mr. Finch is not making fun of you. What's the matter with you?" Mayella looked from under lowered eyelids at Atticus, but she said to the judge, "Long as he keeps calling me ma'am and saying Miss Mayella, I don't have to take his sass. I ain't called upon to take it." Atticus resumed his stroll to the windows and let Judge Taylor handle this one. Judge Taylor was not the kind of figure that ever evoked pity, but I did feel a pang for him as he tried to explain. "That's just Mr. Finch's way," he told Mayella. "We've done business in this court for years and years, and Mr. Finch is always courteous to everybody. And he's not trying to mock you. He's trying to be polite. That's just his way." So that tells us Mayella has no idea what's appropriate and what's not, what's politeness and respectability and what's not. She doesn't see it from her father. She's not in school, so she doesn't get that bonding, that those boundaries, that training, that those are things we as human beings need. She doesn't know compassion and empathy. She's never seen it. She's never exhibited it. She's never learned it. Think about it. We learn those things from the time we're babies. Our parents and guardians set those boundaries. The people that love us around us set those things. The judge leaned back. "Atticus, let's get on with the proceedings and let the record show that the witness has not been sassed. Her views to the contrary." Well, I wondered if anybody had ever called her ma'am or Miss Mail in her life. Probably not, as she took offense to routine courtesy. What on earth was her life like? I soon found out. "You say you're 19, Atticus resumed. How many sisters and brothers have you?" He walked from the windows back to the stand. "7, she said, and I wondered if they were all like the specimen I'd seen the first day as I started school." "You the eldest? The oldest?" "Yes." "How long has your mother been dead?" "I don't know. Long time." "Did you ever go to school?" "Reading right good as Papa yonder." Mayella sounded like Mr. Jingle in a book I'd been reading. "How long did you go to school?" 2 year, 3 year. I don't know. Slowly but surely, I began to see the pattern of Atticus's questions. From questions that Mr. Gilmer did not seem sufficiently irrelevant or immaterial to object to, Atticus was quietly building up before the jury a picture of the Ewells' home life. The jury learned the following things. Their relief check was far from enough to feed the family, and there was suspicion that Papa drank it up anyway. He sometimes went off in the swamp for days and came home sick. The weather was seldom cold enough to require shoes, but when it was, you could make dandy ones from strips of old tires. The family hauled its water in buckets from a stream that ran out of one end of the dump. They kept the surrounding area clear of trash, and it was everybody for himself as far as keeping clean went. If you wanted to wash, you hauled your own water. The younger children had perpetual colds and suffered from chronic ground itch. There was a lady who came around sometimes and asked Mayella why she didn't stay in school. She wrote down the answer. With 2 members of the family reading and writing, there was no need for the rest of them to learn. Papa needed them at home. "Miss Mayella," said Atticus, in spite of himself. A 19-year-old girl like you must have friends. Who are your friends? The witness frowned as if puzzled. Friends? Yes, don't you know anyone near your age or older or younger, boys, girls, just ordinary friends? Mayella's hostility, which had subsided to grudging neutrality, flared again. You making fun of me, Mr. Finch? Atticus let her question answer his. Do you love your father, Miss Mayella? Was his next. Love him? What you mean? I mean, is he good to you? Is he easy to get along with? He does tolerable, except when. Except when? Mayella looked at her father, who was sitting in his chair, tipped against the railing. He sat up straight, and he waited for her to answer. Except for nothing, said Mayella. I said he does tolerable. Mr. Ewell leaned back again. Except when he's drinking? Asked Atticus so gently that Mayella nodded. Does he ever go after you? How you mean? When he's riled, has he ever beaten you? Mayella looked around and down at the court reporter and up at the judge. Answer the question, Miss Mayella, said Judge Taylor. My paws never touched a hair on my head in my life, she declared firmly. He never touched me. Now Atticus's glasses had slipped a little and he pushed them up on his nose. Now we've had a good visit, Miss Mayella, and now I guess we better get to the case. You say you asked Tom Robinson to come chop up what was it? A chifforobe, an old dresser full of drawers on one side. Was Tom Robinson well known to you? What do you mean? I mean, did you know who he was, where he lived? Mayella nodded. I knowed who he was. He passed the house every day. Was this the first time you asked him to come inside the fence? Mayella jumped slightly at the question. Atticus was making his slow pilgrimage to the windows, as he'd been doing. And he'd ask a question, and then he'd look out, and he was waiting for an answer, and he didn't seem to see her involuntarily jump. But it seemed to me that he knew she had moved. He turned around, and he raised his eyebrows. He began again. Yes, it was. Didn't you ever ask him to come inside the fence before? She was prepared now. I did not. I certainly did not. One did not's enough, said Atticus serenely. You never asked him to do odd jobs for you before. I mighta, conceded Mayella. There's several niggers around. Can you remember any other occasion? No. All right, now to what happened. You said Tom Robinson was behind you in the room when you turned around. That right? Yes. And you said he got you around the neck, cussing and saying dirt. Is that right? That's right. Atticus' memory had suddenly become accurate. You say he caught me and choked me and took advantage of me. Is that right? That's what I said. Do you remember him beating you about the face? The witness hesitated. I mean, you seem sure enough that he choked you, and all this time you were fighting back, remember? And you kicked and you hollered as loud as you could. Do you remember him beating you about the face? Mayella was silent. She seemed to be trying to get something clear to herself, and I thought for a moment she was doing Mr. Heck Tate's and my trick of pretending there was a person in front of us. She glanced at Mr. Gilmer. It's an easy question, Miss Mayella, so I'll try again. Do you remember him beating you about the face? Atticus's voice had lost its comfortableness. He was speaking in his arid, detached, professional voice. Do you remember him beating you about the face? No, I don't recollect if he hit me. I mean, yes, I do. Yeah, he hit me. Was your last sentence your answer? Huh? Yes, he hit. I don't remember. I just don't remember. It happened all so quick. Judge Taylor looked sternly at Mayella. Don't you cry, young woman, he began, but Atticus said, you let her cry if she wants to, Judge. We got all the time in the world. Mayella sniffed wrathfully and looked at Atticus. I'll answer any question you got. You get me up here and mock me, will you? I'll answer any question you got. That's fine, said Atticus. There's only a few more. Miss Mayella, not to be tedious, you've testified that the defendant hit you, grabbed you around the neck, choked you, took advantage of you. I just want to make sure you have the right man. Will you identify the man who raped you? I will. That's him right yonder. Atticus turned to the defendant. Tom, stand up. Let Miss Mayella have a good long look at you. Is this the man, Miss Mayella? Now, Tom Robinson's powerful shoulders rippled under his thin shirt. He rose to his feet and he stood with his right hand on the back of his chair. He looked oddly off balance. But it was not in the way he was standing. His left arm was fully 12 inches shorter than his right and hung dead at his side. It ended in a small shriveled hand. And from as far as the balcony I could see, it was of no use to him. Scout, breathed Jim. Scout, look, Reverend, he's crippled. Reverend Sykes leaned across me and whispered to Jim. He got it caught in a cotton gin. Caught it in Mr. Dolphus Raymond's cotton gin when he was a boy. He liked to bled to death. Tore all the muscles loose from his bones. Atticus said, is this the man that raped you? It most certainly is. Atticus's next question was one word long. How? Mayella was raging. I don't know how he done it, but he done it. I said it all happened so fast. Now let's consider this calmly, began Atticus, but Mr. Gilmer interrupted with an objection. He was not irrelevant or immaterial, but Atticus was browbeating the witness. Judge Taylor laughed outright. Oh, sit down, Horace. He's doing nothing of the sort. If anything, the witness is browbeating Atticus. Judge Taylor was the only person in the courtroom who laughed. Even the babies were still. And I suddenly wonder if they'd been smothered at their mother's breasts. Now, said Atticus, Miss Mayella, you have testified that the defendant choked and beat you. You didn't say he sneaked up behind you and knocked you cold, but you turned around and there he was. Atticus was back behind his table, and he emphasized his words by tapping his knuckles on it. Do you wish to reconsider any of your testimony? You want me to say something that didn't happen? No, ma'am. I want you to say something that did happen. Tell us once more, please. What happened? I told you what happened. You testified that you turned around and there he was. He choked you then? Yes. Then he released your throat and hit you? I said he did. He blacked your left eye with his right fist? I ducked it and it glanced. That's what it did. I ducked it and it glanced off. Mayella had finally seen the light. What's the light? There is no way, with Tom's arm and hand the way it is, he can't even lift it on by itself voluntarily. There is no way that he could have choked her. She was choked with two hands. There is no way that could have happened. There is no way he hit her and blacked her eye and the side of her face. Okay. You're becoming suddenly clear on this point. A while ago, you couldn't remember it too well, could you? I said he hit me. All right. He choked you and he hit you and then he raped you. That right? It most certainly is. Well, you're a strong girl. What were you doing all this time? Just standing there? I told you I kicked, I hollered and I kicked and I fought. Atticus reached up and took off his glasses and turned his good red eye to the witness and rained questions on her. Judge Taylor said, one question at a time, Atticus. Give the witness a chance to answer. All right. Why didn't you run? I tried to. Tried to. Well, what kept you from it? He he slung me down. That's what he did. He slung me down, and he got on top of me. You were screaming all this time. I certainly was. Then why didn't the other children hear you? Where were they? At the dump? No answer. Where were they? Why didn't your screams make them come running? The dump's closer than the woods, isn't it? No answer. Or didn't you scream until you saw your father in the window? You didn't think to scream until then, did you? No answer. Did you scream first at your father instead of at Tom Robinson? Was that it? No answer. Who beat you up? Tom Robinson or your father? No answer. What did your father see in the window? The crime of rape or the best defense to it? Why don't you tell the truth, child? Didn't Bobby Well beat you up? When Atticus turned away from Mayella, he looked like his stomach hurt. But Mayella's face was a mixture of terror and fury. Atticus sat down wearily and polished his glasses with his handkerchief. Suddenly, Mayella became articulate. I got something to say, she said. Atticus raised his head. Do you want to tell us what happened? But she did not hear the compassion in the invitation. I got something to say, and then I ain't going to say any more. That nigger yonder took advantage of me, and if you fine, fancy gentlemen don't want to do nothing about it, then you're all yellow, stinking cowards. Stinking cowards, the lot of you. Your fancy airs don't come to nothing. Your Mammon and Miss Mailerin don't come to nothing. Mr. Finch. And then she burst into real tears. Her shoulders shook with angry sobs. She was good as her word. She answered no more questions, even when Mr. Gilmer tried to get her back on track. I guess if she hadn't have been so poor and ignorant, Judge Taylor would have put her under the jail for the contempt she'd shown everybody in the courtroom. And somehow Atticus had hit her hard in a way that was not clear to me, but it gave him no pleasure to do so. He sat with his head down, and I never saw anybody glare at anybody with the hatred Mayella showed when she left the stand and walked by Atticus's table. So we know, just like the Scottsboro boys, we know that no matter what happens, Mayella is going to end up back at the homestead with that father and those children. So no matter what, because we don't have anything, any social systems at this point to take care of abused children or neglected children. So if she tells the truth, Dad's going to beat her. He might beat her to death. If she lies, then nothing changes. Nothing changes here. She knows no different except that no matter what, the fear of being beaten and raped by her father is more powerful than telling the truth in court and setting an innocent man free. because no matter what she says, she's going to be abused. So she is more scared of her father than of anything within the court system. And here's the deal. She's white. And Bob's white. And even though they are atrocious people, inhumanitarians, narcissistic, base and debauched, they are still considered to be above an African American. Good, bad, or ugly. Because of their skin color. Because of the color of their skin. Okay. All right. We'll work on the trial book here in a minute. Let's finish this chapter. Okay. When Mr. Gilmer told Judge Taylor that the state rested, Judge Taylor said, well, it's time we all did. Let's take 10 minutes. Now, Atticus and Mr. Gilmer met in front of the bench and whispered, and then they left the courtroom by a door behind the witness stand, which was a signal for all of us to stretch. I discovered that I'd been sitting on the edge of a long bench, and I was somewhat numb. Jim got up and yawned, Dill did likewise, and Reverend Sykes wiped his face with his hat. The temperature was an easy 90, he said. Now, Mr. Braxton Underwood, who had been sitting quietly in a chair reserved for the press, soaking up testimony with his sponge of a brain, allowed his bitter eyes to rove around the colored balcony, and they met mine, and he gave a snort, and he looked away. Jim, I said, Mr. Underwood's seen us. That's okay. He won't tell Atticus. He'll just put it on the social side of the Tribune. Jim turned to Dill, explaining, I suppose that the finer points of the trial to him, but I wondered what they were. There'd been no lengthy debates between Atticus and Mr. Gilmer on any points. Mr. Gilmer seemed to be prosecuting almost reluctantly. Witnesses had been led by the nose as asses are, and with few objections. But Atticus had once told us that in Judge Taylor's court, any lawyer who was a strict constructionist on evidence usually wound up receiving strict instructions from the bench. He distilled this for me to mean that Judge Taylor might look lazy and operate in his sleep, but he was seldom reversed. And that was the proof of the pudding. Atticus said he was a good judge. Presently, Judge Taylor returned and climbed into his swivel chair. And he took a cigar from his vest pocket and he examined it thoughtfully. A punch, Dill. Having passed the judge's inspection, the cigar suffered a vicious bite. We come down sometimes to watch him, I explained. It's going to take him the rest of the afternoon now. You watch. Now, unaware of public scrutiny from above, Judge Taylor disposed of the severed end by propelling it expertly from his lips and saying, Fluke. He hit a spittoon so squarely we could hear it slosh. Bet he's hell with a spitball, murmured Dale. Now, as a rule, a recess meant a general exodus. But today, people weren't moving. Even the idlers who had failed to shame younger men from their seats, who had remained standing along the walls. I guess Mr. Hectate had reserved the county toilet for the court officials. Now, as a rule, a recess meant, Atticus and Mr. Gilmer returned, and Judge Taylor looked at his watch. It's getting on to 4, he said, which was intriguing as the courthouse clock must have struck the hour at least twice. I had not heard it or felt its vibrations. Shall we try to wind this up this afternoon? Asked Judge Taylor. How about it, Atticus? I think we can, said Atticus. How many witnesses you got? 1. Well, call him. So let's go back. We have 2 more areas. Okay, 2 more areas of facts that we need to put down. Okay. So fact number 5, she's the eldest of 8. That she has 7 siblings. She's the oldest of 8. And in that same number 5, she can barely read and write, about a 2nd, 3rd grade level. Read and write, and mom has been dead a long time. Okay. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't even know what that is. So that goes into number 5. And number 6, she says her paws never touched a hair on her head. He's never touched her. She references that her father drinks. That goes in there as well. She is also vehement, steadfast in her accusation that Tom Robinson is the one who raped her and assaulted her. Okay. And in doing that he had her by the throat and that he hit her and he blacked her eye. Okay. So all those things go into number 6. Now, Atticus asks her ad nauseum, okay, was this Tom Robinson or was this your father? She's not giving that up. If she speaks what really happened, she'll get the tar beat out of her and maybe killed. If she does what her father's telling her to do on the stand, she's still going to get beat. It's a lose-lose situation. She does not understand calling to justice of her father. Okay. Okay, so we have those facts in our trial book for Mayella. We as human beings, we all have fractures that makes us who we are. We have emotional cracks and physical boo-boos, mental fractures. But Mayella's, remember how I always say we live what we learn? She is living as what she has learned. And when that's all you don't know how to fight back with that. You just take it, even though it's painful. Now, remember, Harper wrote this. It's fiction based on facts. So remember the Scottsboro trials. Remember Victoria Price. She had to prostitute herself at 12 to support her and her mother and her siblings. She had to prostitute herself just to make sure she had clothes on her back and for food. So just like Victoria Price, Mayella, she is living what she has learned. And if a lie will keep you from being hurt mentally, physically, emotionally, and all of the above, that's what you'll do to cope. It's horrifying, but it's what'll happen. Okay? All right. So let's go into chapter 19. Last page, peeps. You're doing awesome. Now, we're going to hear Tom's testimony. So if you look on that, we're going to establish some of Tom's facts. Now, the implications on Mayella, we haven't talked about that. What these facts all imply. Well, from what you've just heard me tell you and what you're rolling around in those skulls of yours, this girl has been abused. This girl is lying in fear. This girl, and we don't know why yet. Why she's throwing Tom under the bus. Why Tom in particular? We don't know that yet. So all of your facts, guys, if you look at the facts established, you should be able to imply what poor Miss Mayella is like, because all of those facts are implying what her life is like. Okay. Number 5, it says similar to number 3. So it all comes back down to her being abused. her being physically abused, sexually abused, mentally, emotionally, all of the above, a cacophony, a pond of goo that shows that she is being abused. Okay. All right. So before you're quick to text me and go, I don't know, think about it. Yeah, you all sound like that. A whole bunch of little chickens. I don't know. Think about it. Look at those facts we just laid down about what Mayela said. Those are her facts. Those are what she believes are facts in her head. So what does that imply? What is she trying to say ultimately at a bottom level about her father and behavior, the whole 9 yards? Okay. Use your brain juice, process it, reflect on it, question it, be the detective. Okay. All right. So now we're going to Tom Robinson's testimony. Okay. Kadoki. All right. Here we go. Tom Robinson reached around, ran his fingers under his left arm and lifted it. He guided his arm to the Bible, and his rubber-like left hand sought contact with the black binding. So he's got to lift it up and plop it down. As he raised his right hand, the useless one slipped off the Bible and hit the clerk's table. He was trying again when Judge Taylor growled, "That'll do, Tom." Tom took the oath and stepped into the witness chair. Atticus quickly induced him to tell us. Tom was 25 years old. He was married with 3 children, and he'd been in trouble with the law before. He once received 30 days for disorderly conduct. So let's put that information in the first box. Put that information in the first box. He's 25. He's married with 3 children. He's been in trouble with the law before. We'll find out what happened. And in being in trouble with the law, he had received 30 days of jail time for disorderly conduct. Stella, you just need to have your nose in here. Yeah, they can all see you. See that I got you, girl. But you can't have your nose, honey. You're worse than Scout. You just got to be in there and everything, don't you? Yeah, you're sweet. You're not as smart as Scout, though, are you? No, but you're cute. I'll keep you. I'll keep you. Okay, get down. All right. So, right, did you get those into your trial booklet? Okay. 25 years of age, married with 3 children, been in trouble with the law before, causing him to have 30 days in jail for disorderly conduct. There we go. It must have been disorderly, said Atticus. What did it consist of? I got in a fight with another man. He tried to cut me. Well, did he succeed? Oh, yes, sir. A little, not enough to hurt. You see, Tom moved his left shoulder. Yes, said Atticus. You were both convicted? Yes, sir. I had to serve because I couldn't pay the fine. Other fellow paid his. Dill leaned across me and asked Jim what Atticus was doing, and Jim said Atticus was showing the jury that Tom had nothing to hide. Were you acquainted with Mayella Violet Ewell? Asked Atticus. Yes, sir. I had to pass her place going to and from the field every day. Whose field? I picks for Mr. Link D's. Were you picking cotton in November? No, sir. I works in his yard fall and winter time. I works pretty steady for him all year round. He got lots of pecan trees and things. So you say you had to pass the Ewell place to get to and from work. Is there any other way to go? No, sir, none that I know of. Tom, did she ever speak to you? Well, yes, sir. I'd tip my hat when I'd go by, and one day she asked me to come inside the fence and bust up a shipper room for her. When did she ask you to chop up the shipper rope? Well, Mr. Finch, it was way last spring. I remember it because it was chopping time and I had my hoe with me. Hoe, Hoe, not hoe, as in what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. I said I didn't have nothing but this hoe, and she said she had a hatchet. And she gave me the hatchet, and I broke up the shiffer rope. And she said, I reckon I'll have to give you a nickel, won't I? And I said, no, ma'am, there ain't no charge. And then I went home. Mr. Finch, that was way last spring, way over a year ago. So in number 2, fact established, he chopped up that shiffer robe last spring, over a year ago. What is Mayella talking about? Okay, so put that in number 2, just like he said. Over a year ago, he chopped up that shiffer robe. Okay. Did you ever go on the place again? Yes, sir. When? Well, I went lots of times. Judge Taylor instinctively reached for his gavel, but let his hand fall, and the murmur below us died without his help. Under what circumstances? Lisa, why did you go inside the fence lots of times? Tom Robinson's forehead relaxed. Well, she'd call me in, sir, and seemed like every time I passed by yonder, she'd have some little something for me to do. Chopping kindling, toting water for her. She watered them red flowers every day. Think about it. Were you paid for your services? No, sir. Not after she offered me a nickel the first time. I was glad to do it. Mr. Ewell don't seem to help her none, and neither did the children, and I know she don't have no nickels to spare. Where were the other children? Oh, they're always around all over the place. They'd watch me work, some of them sat in the window. Would Miss Mayella talk to you? Yes, sir, she talked to me. As Tom Robinson gave his testimony, it came to me that Mayella Ewell must be the loneliest person in the world. She was even lonelier than Boo Radley, who'd not been out of the house in 25 years. When Atticus asked had she any friends, she seemed not to know what he meant, and then she thought he was making fun of her. She was as sad, I thought, as what Jim called a mixed child. White people wouldn't have anything to do with her because she lived among pigs, and Negroes wouldn't have anything to do with her because she was white. She couldn't live like Mr. Dolphus Raymond, who preferred the company of Negroes because she didn't own a riverbank and she wasn't from a fine old family. Nobody said that's just their way about the Ewells. Macomb gave them their Christmas baskets, welfare money in the back of its hand. Tom Robinson was probably the only person who was ever decent to her. But she said he took advantage of her, and when she stood up, she looked at him as if he were dirt beneath her feet. Did you ever, Atticus interrupted my meditations, at any time go on the Ewell property? Did you ever set foot on the Ewell property without an express invitation from one of them? No, sir, Mr. Finch, I never did. I wouldn't do that, sir. See, that would be against the law for African American men. Atticus sometimes said that one way to tell whether a witness was lying or telling the truth was to listen rather than watch. Now I applied his test. Tom denied it 3 times in one breath, but quietly with no hint of whining in his voice, and I found myself believing him in spite of his protesting too much. He seemed to be a respectable Negro, and a respectable Negro would never go up into somebody's yard of his own volition. Tom, now what happened to you on the evening of November 21st of last year? And below us, the spectators drew a collective breath and they leaned forward, and behind us, the Negroes did the same. Tom was a black velvet Negro, not shiny, but soft, black velvet. The whites of his eyes shone in his face, and when he spoke, we saw the flashes of his teeth. If he had been whole, he would have been a fine specimen of a man. So there's the little girl's perspective. If he'd been perfect, he'd had his whole hand, he would have been a perfect specimen. That makes a perfect specimen. Mr. Finch, he said, I was going home as usual that evening. And when I passed the Ewell place, Miss Mayella were on the porch like she said she were. And it seemed real quiet like, and I didn't quite know why. And I was studying why, just passing by, when she says for me to come there and help her a minute. Well, I went inside the fence and looked around for some kindling to work on, but I didn't see none. And she says, now I got something for you to do in the house. Well, the old door's off its hinges and fall's coming on pretty fast. I said, you got a screwdriver, Miss Mail? And she said she sure did. Well, I went up the steps and she motioned me to come inside. And I went in the front room and I looked at the door. I said, Miss Mayella, this door look all right. I pulled it back and forth. Those hinges were all right. And then she shut the door in my face. Mr. Finch, I was wondering why it was so quiet like, and it comes to me that there weren't a child on the place. Not one of them. And I said, Miss Mayella, where are the children? Tom's black velvet skin had begun to shine, and he ran his hand over his face. I said, where are the children? He continued, and she says, she was laughing sort of. She says, they all gone to town to get ice creams. She says, it took me a slap year to save 7 nickels. But I done it. They all gone to town. She's been planning this for a year, guys. Planning. That's how lonely and desperate. Tom's discomfort was not from the humidity. What did you say then, Tom? Asked Atticus. Well, I said something like, what? Why, Miss Mayella, that's right smart of you to treat him. And she said, you think so? I don't think she understood what I was thinking. I meant it was smart of her to save like that and nice of her to treat him. I understand you, Tom. Go on, said Atticus. Well, I said I best be going, and I couldn't do nothing for her. And she says, oh, yes, I could. And I asked her what, and she says just to step on that chair yonder and get that box down from the top of the shiffer robe. Not the same shiffer robe you busted up? Asked Atticus. The witness smiled. No, sir, another one. Most as tall as the room, and so I done what she told me, and I was reaching when the next thing I know, she grabbed me around the legs. She grabbed me around the legs, Mr. Finch. She scared me so bad I hopped down and I turned the chair over, and that was the only furniture disturbed in the room. Mr. Finch, when I left it, I swear for God. So he's standing, he gets up on the chair to get down something for her off the ship room. She grabs him like in a hug around the waist. He's standing on a chair. Where does that put her face? That's right. Now, there's only one way she'd know that. And that's if her father has taught her. Yep. Process that. Okay. And what she knows of quote unquote love is what her father displays to her. So in her mind, that must be love. Okay. She scared me so bad I hopped down and turned the chair over, and that was the only furniture disturbed in the room, Mr. Finch, when I left it. I swear for God. Well, what happened after you turned the chair over? Tom Robinson had come to a dead stop, and he glanced at Atticus, and then at the jury, and then at Mr. Underwood sitting across the room. Tom, you sworn to tell the whole truth. Will you tell it? Tom ran his hand nervously over his mouth. What happened after that? Answer the question, said Judge Taylor. 1/3 of his cigar had vanished. Mr. Finch, I got down off of that chair and I turned around and she sort of jumped on me. Jumped on you violently? No, sir. She hugged me. She hugged me around the waist. This time, Judge Taylor's gavel came down with a bang, and as it did, the overhead lights went on in the courtroom. Darkness had not come, but the afternoon sun had left the windows, and Judge Taylor quickly restored order. Then what did she do? The witness swallowed hard. She reached up and she kissed me side of the face. She says she never kissed a grown man before, and she thought she might as well kiss a nigger. She says what her papa do to her don't count. She says, kiss me back, nigger. And I says, Miss Mela, let me out of here. And I tried to run, but when she got her back at the door and I had to push her, and I didn't want to harm her, Mr. Finch. I said, let me pass. But just when I said, Mr. Ewell yonder hollered through the window. What did he say? Tom Robinson swallowed again and his eyes widened. Something not fitting to say, not fitting for these folks and children to hear. What did he say, Tom? You must tell the jury what he said. Tom Robinson shut his eyes tight. He says, you goddamn whore, I'll kill you. Then what happened? Well, Mr. Finch, I was running so fast I didn't know what happened. Tom, did you rape Miss Mayella? I did not, sir. Did you harm her in any way? I did not, sir. Did you resist her advances? Mr. Finch, I tried. I tried without being ugly to her. I didn't want to be ugly. I didn't want to push her or nothing. It occurred to me that in their own way, Tom Robinson's manners were as good as Atticus's. And until my father explained it to me later, I didn't understand the subtlety of Tom's predicament. He would not have dared strike a white woman under any circumstances and expect to live long. So he took the first opportunity to run. A sure sign of guilt. You guys, he's damned if he does and he's damned if he don't. There's no getting out of it. Just like with the Scottsboro boys. No matter what is said, their color is going to delegate their sentence. Tom, go back once more to Mr. Ewell, said Atticus. Did he say anything to you? Not anything, sir. He might have said something, but I weren't there. That'll do. Atticus cut in sharply. What you did hear, who was he talking to? Mr. Finch, he were talking and looking at Miss Mayella. And then you ran? I sure did, sir. Why'd you run? I was scared, sir. Why were you scared? Mr. Finch, if you was a nigger like me, you'd be scared too. Atticus sat down, and Mr. Gilmer was making his way to the witness stand, but before he got there, Mr. Linkdees rose from the audience and announced, I just want the whole lot of you to know one thing right now. That boy's worked for me 8 years, and I hadn't had a speck of trouble out of him. Not a speck. Shut your mouth, sir. Judge Taylor was wide awake and roaring. He was also pink in the face. His speech was miraculously unimpaired by a cigar. Linkdees, he yelled. If you have anything to say, you can say it under oath and at the proper time. But until then, you get out of this room. You hear me? Get out of this room, sir. You hear me? I'll be damned if I listen to this case again. Judge Taylor looked daggers at Atticus as if daring him to speak, but Atticus had ducked his head and was laughing into his lap. I remembered something he'd said about Judge Taylor's ex-cathedra remarks sometimes exceeding his duty. Yeah. But that few lawyers ever did anything about them, and I looked at Jem, but Jem shook his head. Well, it ain't like one of the jurymen got up and started talking, he said. I think it'd be different then. Mr. Link was just disturbing the peace or something. Now, Judge Taylor told the reporter to expunge anything he happened to have written down after Mr. Finch, if you were a nigger like me, you'd be scared too, and he told the jury to disregard the interruption. He looked suspiciously down the middle aisle and waited, I suppose, for Mr. Linkdees to effect total departure. And then he said, Go ahead, Mr. Gilmer. You were given 30 days once for disorderly conduct. Robinson? Asked Mr. Gilmer. Yes, sir. What'd the nigger look like when you got through with him? He beat me, Mr. Gilmer. Yes, but you were convicted, weren't you? Atticus raised his head. It was a misdemeanor and it's in the record, Judge. I thought he sounded tired. Witness will answer, though, said Judge Taylor just as wearily. Yes, sir, I got 30 days. Now, I knew that Mr. Gilmer would sincerely tell the jury that anyone who was convicted of disorderly conduct could easily have had it in his heart to take advantage of Mayella Ewell, and that was the only reason he cared. Reasons like that helped. Robinson, you're pretty good at busting up chiffon and kindling with one hand, aren't you? Well, yes, sir, I reckon so. Strong enough to choke the breath out of a woman and sling her to the floor? I never done that, sir. But are you strong enough to? I reckon so, sir. Had your eye on her a long time, hadn't you, boy? No, sir, I never looked at her. Then you were mighty polite to do all that chopping and hollering for her, weren't you, boy? I was just trying to help her out, sir. That was mighty generous of you. You had chores at home after your regular work, didn't you? Yes, sir. Why didn't you do them instead of Miss Ewell's? I done 'em both, sir. Well, you must have been pretty busy. Why? Why, why what, sir? Why were you so anxious to do that woman's chores? Tom Robinson hesitated, searching for an answer. Well, it looked like she didn't have anybody to help her, like I says. With Mr. Ewell and 7 children on the place? Boy, well, I says it looked like they never help her none. You did all this chopping and work from sheer goodness, boy. I tried to help her, I says. Mr. Gilmer looked grimly at the jury. You're a mighty good fellow, it seems. You did all this for not one penny? Yeah. Not everything revolves around money and getting paid for it. That's what makes us human beings. That's what makes us humanitarians. Yes, and I felt sorry for her, but she seemed to try more than the rest of them. You felt sorry for her. You felt sorry for her? Mr. Gilmer seemed ready to rise to the ceiling. The witness realized his mistake and shifted uncomfortably in the chair, but the damage was done. Below us, nobody liked Tom Robinson's answer, and Mr. Gilman paused a long time to let it sink in. So, if an African American is below a white, no matter what kind of a person they are, and that black African American man or woman does it because they feel sorry, they're feeling pity, trying to walk in those shoes, trying to walk in those shoes. Okay, it's not good. Kind of seals your fate. That just because now it makes it look like he is putting himself above a white person. I know, I know. Roll your eyes, shake your head, but that's the way it was. And it's still the way it is in places. It's still going on. Okay. Now you went by the house as usual last November 21st, he said, and she asked you to come in and bust off a ship of rope. No, sir. Do you deny that you went by the house? No, sir. She said she had something for me to do inside the house. Well, she says she asked you to bust up a shiffer robe. Is that right? No, sir. It ain't. Then you say she's lying, boy? Atticus was on his feet, but Tom Robinson didn't need him. I didn't say she's lying, Mr. Gilmer. I say she's mistaken in her mind. His guys, now he calls a white woman a liar, and we're cutting our throat that way too. See, he's damned if he do and damned if he don't. To the next 10 questions, as Mr. Gilmer reviewed Mayella's version of events, the witness's steady answer was that she was mistaken in her mind. Well, didn't Mr. Ewell run you off the place, boy? No, sir, I don't think he did. Don't think? What do you mean? I mean, I didn't stay long enough for him to run me off. You're very candid about this. Why did you run so fast? Well, I says I was scared, sir. If you had a clear conscience, why were you scared? Well, like I says before, I wouldn't say for any nigger to be in a fix like that. But you weren't in a fix. You testified that you were resisting Miss Ewell. Were you so scared that she'd hurt you, you ran a big buck like you? No, sir, I was scared I'd be in court like I am now. Scared of arrest? Scared you'd have to face up to what you did? No, sir. I was scared I'd have to face up to what I didn't do. Are you being impudent with me, boy? No, sir. I didn't go to be. Now, this was as much as I heard of Mr. Gilmer's cross-examination, because Jim made me take Dill out. For some reason, Dill had started crying and couldn't stop. See, Dill he's a softie. He knows exactly that something bad is going down. He was crying and he couldn't stop, and quietly at first, and then his sobs were heard by several people in the balcony. Jim said if I didn't go with him, he'd make me, and Reverend Sykes said I better go, so I went. And Dylan seemed to be all right that day, nothing wrong with him, but I guess he hadn't fully recovered from running away. Ain't you feeling good? I asked when we reached the bottom of the stairs. Dale tried to pull himself together as we ran down the south steps. Mr. Langdees was a lonely figure on the top step. Anything happening, Scout? He asked as we went by. No, sir, I answered over my shoulder. But Dale's here. He's sick. Come on out under the trees, I said. Heat got you, I expect. We chose the fattest live oak and we sat under it. It was just him that I couldn't stand, Dale said. Who, Tom? No, that old Mr. Gilmer doing him that way and talking so hateful to him. Dale, that's his job. Why, if we didn't have prosecutors, well, then we wouldn't have defense attorneys, I reckon. Dill exhaled patiently. I know all that, Scout. It was the way he said it that made me sick. Plain sick. Well, he's supposed to act that way. Dill, he didn't act that way when Dill. Those were his own witnesses. Well, Mr. Finch didn't act that way to me, Ella, and the old man when he cross-examined them. And the way that man called him boy all the time and sneered at him and looked around at the jury every time he answered. Well, Dill, after all, he's just a Negro. Scout doesn't realize what she's saying or the symbolism and the depth to what she's saying. I don't care one speck. It ain't right because somehow it ain't right to do him that way. And hasn't anybody got any business talking like that? It just makes me sick. Well, that's just Mr. Gilmer's way, Dill. He does them all that way. You've never seen him get good and down on one yet. Well, today, Mr. Gilmer seemed to me like he wasn't even half trying. They do them all that way. Most lawyers, I mean. Mr. Finch doesn't. Well, he's not an example, Dill. I was trying to grope in my memory for a sharp phrase of Miss Lottie Atkinson, and I had it. He's the same in the courtroom as he is on the public streets. That's not what I mean, said Dill. Oh, I know what you mean, said a voice behind us. We thought it might have come from the tree trunk, but it belonged to Mr. Dolphus Raymond. He peered around the trunk at us. You aren't thin-hided. It just makes you sick, doesn't it? Okay. There's our end of 19. Now, let's go over here. We need to fill in Tom's testimony. Okay. So we have it. Now, let's go back to the beginning of 19 there, and let's glide through. So we have all these facts. And you know what? I do this every year. I always fill one out every year because I always find new little innuendos and things every time. And now that Jada said that about the red geraniums, that's a whole new, I'm going to have to do some research, see if anybody else has come up with that, because I've never heard that one come through. So that's, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on here. All right. So, we know, hold on. We know that in number 1, he's 25, married with 3 kids, and he did 30 days in jail once for disorderly conduct, basically because he couldn't pay the fine. The other guy could. The other guy beat him up. The other guy could pay his fine, but he couldn't, so he had to spend the time in jail. Okay? So that's all in number 1. Okay? So, looking at that, what does that imply? He's got a family. Yep, he got in trouble when he was younger. I know lots of my students that have made choices and had negative consequences because of those choices. Okay. So we know he's a family man. We also know from some background, if you remember, about giving some detail that he had been also a member of Calpurnia's church. Okay. So we know that he has a family. We know that he got in trouble. That doesn't necessarily dictate his life now. Everybody makes mistakes. He paid his time because he couldn't pay the fine. Okay. All right. So now, number 2, it was a year ago when he busted up the Schifferobe for Mayella and got a nickel. He didn't deny that, but he said that was a year ago. It was no. So a year ago when he busted up the Schifferobe. Yes, I know you're wondering how to spell Schifferobe. It's right there. Look down in your book. Come on, you can do it. Okay. And he also, under number 3, on mine it's 217. He says he picks for Mr. Link D's. So he works under number 3. We know he works for Link D's, either picking cotton or pecans or whatever. He works for Mr. Link D's on his estate. Okay. So that also tells us for number 3, he works for Link D's. He's gainfully employed, or he was. He had a job. He was responsible, was taking care of his family. Okay. Now, number 4, he admits he went back to the Ewell place lots of times. So we want to put back that because he was asked that and he admitted it. He went back to the Ewells lots of times. Okay. And why did he? Because he felt sorry she was all alone. I mean, she's got 7 kids. Mr. Ewell's not in sight, not doing anything. And he wanted to help her. He was being kind, giving her a helping hand with the mess she had going on there. So under number 4, he went back lots of times, but he also was helping her with lots of chores around there because she couldn't do everything. And Ewell wasn't around. Okay. So that other portion there went back to the Ewells lots of times to help with chores. Okay. So he's being kind. He's being helpful. He's being a human being, being collaborative and cooperative and community spirit. that reciprocation. That's what people do. Okay. All right. So then we get to the means of it. So in number 5, he went, she invited him in to check the door. So that's the first thing. So invited him in to check the door. Door was fine. She asked him to get something off the chifforobe. He did, and she jumped him. So we're going to put on there, she jumped on him, which scared the tar out of him because she's white, he's black, and he's a happily married man, or so that we know. Jumped on him around the waist. Her definition of love is a lot different. And her definition of friendship is a lot different. Jumped on him, he jumped down, and she kissed the side of his cheek. So what does that tell us about Miss Mayella not having any friends? He shows up to help her with stuff. She's not even realizing it. She's realizing she's got a friend in him. And what she's feeling is that crush. We've all had those crushes. Yeah, don't deny it. You can, but I'm not believing it. You know, big, small, doesn't matter. So she kisses him. So also under number 5, she kisses him on the cheek. She jumps on him, hugs him around the waist, kisses him on the cheek, scares the tar out of him, basically. Okay. So that's what the facts imply. She scared him half to death. That is not what he expected. He thought she had something for him to do. Oh, she thinks she got something for him to do. And he, yeah, woo. Yeah, no, not good, not good, not good. No, no, no. And he knows it. Okay. And he knows he's in a tight spot. Oh, yeah. See there? Oh, brother, where art thou? We're in a tight spot. Okay. So he knows, though, that there's a problem. Okay. First of all, this shouldn't be happening. This is bad news bears. Okay. So then he realizes also the children are gone. She has sent them away. This is a setup. So the facts imply this was a setup. She has a crush on him. She has no idea what's appropriate behavior. She knows what is exhibited to her by her father. Woof. Okay. So that takes us into number 6. He ran. He ran because he didn't want to hurt her, like shoving her away, like get away from me. He pushed her away, but he didn't want to assault her. He just wanted to get the crap out of there because he didn't want to get lambasted for something he didn't do. Guess what? He did get lambasted for something he didn't do. And there is no way, guys. There were marks all around the throat. Even with his large hand, the reality is he is not going to be able to, with a useless arm and nub, to strangle her. He could with his right hand throw her down, but he's scared. He's scared. Big doesn't necessarily mean strong. I know lots of guys that are tall and broad, and I'm sorry, that even in a week, they couldn't hurt a fly. So it is obvious that Tom could not have done this. Okay. Just like with the Scottsboro trials, we've got the guy that had syphilis. There is no way that he could have raped the girls, let alone all the other details and the facts on that. Okay. All right. So number 6, fact is he ran and he got out of there. Okay. Another fact, not only did he run because he was scared, last but not least, he felt sorry for her. He says it. And that also implies it implies he's a good person. It implies that he knows what's going on. He knows that she's in a bad situation. But in that time period, that would also imply that he put himself above a white woman. We wouldn't think that. But you also have to, we've got our facts and those implications. And one of the implications, time period wise, with the story would be that he was, by feeling sorry for her, he was putting himself above a white woman. Yeah. So we got problems. That's a problem. Okay. So yeah, it's a mess. And Tom knows the moment she jumps on him, he just imagine that I'm going to get in trouble for this. No matter what I do, I'm a black man and a white man in a white man's world. And here's the thing. In this story, there are more people that are humanitarian and open-minded, even with time period and what's going on. The way this emanates from Harper's story. But all it takes is one rotten apple, one scared person. Remember Mr. Cunningham, the night when Atticus was watching over Tom at the jail. All it took was a man getting a group of guys together to cause a ruckus, cause problems. Scout was lucky enough in her innocence to be able to diffuse that and bring some humanity into their hearts and their minds, and they left. Right now in this courtroom, everything that is said is taken at face value. So remember, Scout had asked Atticus, will we win the case? And he said no. Just like with the Scottsboro boys, no. But he's hoping, he's doing his best, and that's why Judge Taylor wanted him to be the one defending Tom, to hopefully get this squelched and save Tom's life. Okay? It is a sad, sad state of affairs. Okay. So, before I start sobbing like a baby, that'll come in a few more chapters. All right. So, I need you guys to stay strong. I need you to be safe. I need you to make good choices and good, so you have good consequences. Day by day, things are getting worse. And I told you what happened. And we've got each other. We've got this. If you're feeling overwhelmed, procrastinating, I just made a new word, procrastinating, take things in chunks. In life, procrastination is a thing. And you've heard me say, there's a time and a place to be lazy, but you got to get your responsibilities done. Take them in chunks. I've got you guys submitting stuff day and night. My phone will go off in the middle of the night and I'll double check it and somebody's turned something in. I'm trying to respond with a thank you so you know that I got it. Okay. I'm in the midst of grading and getting that stuff in. Like I said, I'm not doing the no late work. But if you get farther and farther behind, you're going to be drowning in stuff. Okay. So take it in chunks. The great thing is you can listen to a chapter, do a chapter, and come back. You got options, peeps. Okay. I have every day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 in my Zoom room. And I emailed you the code and I'll admit you in. And remind, okay? And you should have my phone. And yeah. And you got me? Okay, whatever. So I love you. I worry about you. I care about you and your families. Be safe, get sleep, do little chunks. You are loved, you are good, you are kind, you are special. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Okay? Be those humanitarians. You can do it. I'm only going to put 18 and 19 on for this week. Next week is Easter and Passover. Next week, we will do 20 and 21. Plus, we'll do a fun little activity. Ooh, Miller's got an activity. Yeah, I'm your nerd girl. So we'll do that. We'll only do 2 chapters this week, 2 next week with our activity next week. Now that we're done with trial, well, we're not done. We haven't heard the summations, but we've got our facts for each of our people. Once you get those in nice and neat, take pictures of them or scan them, whatever you want to do, and send them to me. Okay, and then we'll get the trial book in. I believe I think it's worth 64 points. Either 45 or 60. I can't remember. I have to look it up. I got to count it again. I got to do math. Okay. If you have any questions, holler at me. Otherwise, you can always stop into my Zoom classroom from 9 to 11. I have theater class and novels class every other day from 11 to 12, 12:30. But from 9 to 11, I'm there for you. Okay. You can come in more than once. I mean, more than one of you can come in. Doesn't matter. And that's it. So take care. If you need anything, holler, and I will see you soon. Bye.